In this video, we're going to talk about the new, refreshed, redesigned bank feed screen in QuickBooks Online. Now, keep in mind that not all versions of QuickBooks Online have this screen already. And the way you know you're in the new screen is because you would see one big button that says Provide Feedback, and then a drop-down menu that would give you the option to switch back to the old bank page. If you click on that, it will ask you for some feedback, and then after you answer the feedback, it'll send you back to the old banking page. Now, some of you may still be on the old banking page, which, by the way, is a gold standard. It's actually great. It's probably one of the best things that QuickBooks has built over the years is this traditional banking page, because it hasn't had a redesign or a refresh in a very long time. And as a matter of fact, all they've been doing is adding improvements to it. Now, if you see a button that says Try a new banking page, that's the one that would allow you to switch from the old version into the new version. And then again, you can switch back if you don't want to. So some of the features that are worth highlighting for this new bank page is that the buttons up here say pending, posted, and excluded. So pending would be everything that you have just downloaded from the bank feeds that hasn't been categorized yet. Posted is what you have already categorized, and you have the option inside of the posted screen to undo or reverse some of these. And then excluded is anything that you have deleted or excluded from the bank feeds. So that doesn't change the mechanics. So thank God we don't have to remember a new thing. So that might be part of what's familiar. On the search screen is basically just a filter. So if I type just the word 11, it will actually filter out any transactions that only contain the word 11, right? Like a 7-Eleven. If I put Adobe or something like that, and I search for Adobe, there's nothing for Adobe. Let's try the word cafe. Search for that. There's some coffee shops. Let's type the word coffee. Let's see what happens if I just type coffee in this case. Something with coffee. So you kind of get the idea. So you have the traditional search or filter button in there. Then by default, it's going to show up all dates. But if you only want to look at a particular month or a particular year, you can do that. So let's say I only want to do 2025. I click on apply, and it should only show me 2025 transactions if there's any. Let's do last year and click on apply, and then it should only show me last year's worth of transactions. So the filter option there allows you to do all dates as a default or pick a particular date range. Now there's a general filter here where all transactions show up as a default. You could do money in, and it will only show you deposits, so to speak. Or if you're in a credit card, it will only show you refunds or payments to the credit card. If you actually select money out, it will only show expenses or credit card charges if you're on a credit card. Post or correct, that one actually I don't know what that is, so that's kind of interesting. So I'm not sure what that means. And then we have suggested matches. I think these two probably make the most sense when you're inside posted. So these are actually filters related to posted, but I really can't tell. So those are the two that, for the time being, I really don't know what post or correct or suggested matches are. Suggested matches, I think I know what they mean, but I don't see any on my screen, so it's hard to show. Then we have transfers, which, from my understanding, the new bank feed screen doesn't suggest any transfers. So that's kind of good. And then we have rules, anything that has been outed by rules, which we haven't talked about yet. And then missing to from, that's anything that doesn't have a vendor or payee, which in this case should be most of them because I haven't added vendor or payee. And then anything pointing into an uncategorized income or uncategorized expense, which surprisingly none of them are. Everything is actually being categorized to something. Okay. So one really valuable trait of this new bank feed screen, so it's not just a new look, is that QuickBooks does try to do a pretty good job at categorizing things for you. And I'm not going to say that it's 100% accurate, but it's actually a lot better than the traditional bank feeds. And you also see there's two types of match or categorize. There's match or categorize based on previous patterns, and then there's based on AI detection. So anything that has these little stars here, it's AI detection, and the AI detection will actually give you an explanation for what that is. So we're going to go back to that in a second. The other things that are worth mentioning here is the general configuration of the columns. If I click on this little gear button on top of the table, I get to choose what I want to see in here. So I can start by unchecking everything. So I'm just going to uncheck every single option, and then we're going to just start at a score with no additional options added. So we sort of are going to have the least amount of things or moving parts working in here. So this will be the core. You're going to get a date, the bank description that came from the bank, the amount, in this case an expense amount, the category that is set at the moment, defaulted to categorize. This is actually a button that allows you to do a match instead of categorize. There's a post button that it's sort of the same thing as you accepting the current categorized mode. So post would be like a save or add or something like that. And then there's a drop-down menu under post where you can split, create a rule from the bank feed, or exclude. So let's start exploring categorizing each of these transactions. So we have this one right here called 136 family save sec. Sometimes it won't know, like AI won't detect what this is. It is guessing meals and entertainment, but here on this right side, you don't see any AI suggestions. We're going to see in a little bit. So all you see is a traditional switching from expense to transfer transaction type, selecting the vendor name, the class, the location, if you happen to have that, and customer project, if you happen to have that. If you're in the lower versions of QuickBooks Online, like Simple Start or Essentials, class locations and customer projects are not even a part of that. You get the upload button down here, so you can upload if you have any particular receipt or something like that, or you can add additional memos. So at this point, I'm going to go ahead and create the vendor. So we're going to call this Family Save or something like that. Let's say that's the name of a store. I click on Add New, and I get a drawer on the right-hand side. I pick that it's a vendor and not a customer. Click on Save. That creates the vendor or the payee. We leave it as expense, which is the most typical one. But then we have to move the cursor up here, which is kind of what I don't like. I wish this categorize drop down would be down here once you expand it. But whatever, this is where it is now. So then let's say that's going to be just a meals and entertainment or something like that. Okay, and then so that would be the place to categorize. And here I can put purchased food for meeting or something like that. Okay, and that would be it. That's really all you need to know. If you do upload a attachment, you can re-download the attachment by clicking on this little download button, or you can delete it if you wanted to sort of undo that process. So we click on post, and that essentially that saves the transaction, that adds the transaction, that completes the transaction. Let's say we want to split up an expense. Let's go back here to, let's say this one, Cafe Canela. I'm going to open this one up, and let's say that this one is really half distribution and half a business meal. Let's just say that. So in order to split that, we actually have to go into the little drop-down menu and click on split. So once you click on split, you get a new sort of pop-up screen that allows you to do the split. In this case, we can add the vendor's name. If we don't have it in the vendor list, I'll just go ahead and create it on the fly here, create the vendor. Okay, and then we're gonna split this up. So let's say from here, $20 were meals and entertainment, and $8.04 is a distribution. Let's say we have an account called distribution or something called owners. Okay, owners draw, perfect. Okay, so that's how you do a split, and then you can put here food for the office, food for owners home, or whatever, right? If you want to add more notes to the description in a split mode, and then if you have classes or customers, you would add that in there, and that you would follow that workflow. Then we just click on split and post, and split and post basically means saving the transaction as a split. Now, those two transactions I just created, they come off the pending page. If I click on post it, now they're part of the posted list. So we can see how these transactions were created. So for example, this family faves, I saved it as family save, and then I put meals and entertainment, and that went into expense. And I can click on that and actually look or inspect the transaction, which I can edit, delete, or whatever at that point. I can X out of that. Or I can click on the undo button if I want to send it back into pending. Now, specifically for this one that has a split, this one just says split on it, right? And then the only way I would be able to edit that is to click on it and then change the particular transactions in the split because the transaction is already created and it has already been split. But if the transaction has not been split like this one, I can then change the category if I happen to have categorized that one wrong. And also, it's really cool. I can actually change a bunch of these categories all in one shot from the transactions that have already been posted, I can select them all, click on edit, and then change them, let's say to owner's draw. Let's say we had categorized them wrong, and then go to apply and post, and it will change all of them except for the split transaction, because the split transaction would have to be edited manually. So that gives you a general idea for how powerful this posted screen is, because you can batch edit transactions after the fact. Okay. Now let's start exploring some of the options that we have here to kind of expand or customize the look and feel of the screen. So we're going to click on the gear menu again, and we're going to understand what all these additional columns are. So files would be a little small column where basically all you can do is click on the little plus button and add any sort of attachment that you have on the fly, and you can add the attachment into the specific transaction. So by doing that, you can really quickly start adding the attachments to the transactions so that you can sort of review them afterwards. So it's a really cool little button that you can do to add any sort of attachment. Then the other thing that we can add is we're going to click on the gear menu. We can add this to from. That basically means payee or vendor name. So if I want to create the vendor name on the fly, I can do it here. So I can click on add new, and I can call it Loan Depot, whatever the vendor's name is. Click on save. So basically create it on the fly. And then I can categorize on the fly, or click on expand, open it. So I can just click on anywhere in that screen to open it, expand it, and then I can go deep into entering a class, a location, or a customer, or additional memo. Now, another thing worth looking at is having the class, the location, and the customer. And this is for QuickBooks Online Plus or QuickBooks Online Advanced customers, where you are going to have job costing or class or location. So one thing that people are really liking about this screen is that you get to see all that stuff inline. Okay, and I'm going to collapse the left navigation bar because I have a pretty long list of columns here. But if you want to just select your classes, your locations, and your customer jobs on the fly while looking at this line and not having to expand it, that's a huge, huge plus. People are liking that. There's a lot of accounting professionals that I talk to are liking that. So we're just going to, I'll create a class here just so we have a class so we can have something to enter in there. So we have our classes, our locations, our customers all inline. So we can create that on the fly. We can add the files, obviously categorize. We're going to click on the gear menu and then see what else we have. So we have group rows by selected column. We're going to go back to that in a second. But the one I do want to show is add new vendors. This one's pretty interesting and has always felt a little bit useless, but now it's feeling a little bit more useful. And I'll show you what I mean by that. So I'll post this transaction, and then I'm going to go to a transaction where QuickBooks might suggest the vendor name to be created. So for example, if I click on this drop-down menu and I don't see the suggestion, I would have to click on add new and then actually type the word 7-Eleven in there. But in some cases, QuickBooks will actually suggest a vendor. Let's see, like this is a good example. So this one called Calvin Klein. When I click on the drop-down menu, I actually see suggested add Calvin Klein. So when I actually click on that, it creates the vendor and it automatically types and brings that vendor payee for me. Now the problem is this doesn't happen with all payees. So it's a little bit sort of intermittent. It works with some and not others. Like here, it works with Chevron. So I can quickly add the Chevron, or let's see if it works with Chick-fil-A. I'm going to make the assumption that it'll work with Chick-fil-A. There we go, it'll work with Chick-fil-A. But it might not work with an obscure vendor like this one called Burrito Beach. It didn't work there. So it's only for those major, large vendors in which QuickBooks has really high level of confidence that they're suggesting a correct vendor or payee name. Weird that it didn't suggest it for 7-Eleven, right? That being such a known name. So it's not automatically that just because it's a big company or known company that it's going to make those suggestions. Now I'm going to scroll a little bit down and I'm going to look at these two Costco. So if you look at these two Costco, I already had the vendor Costco in there, so I recognized that, so I didn't have to select it. But down here it says supplies, and then there's the little stars, the little magic dust or whatever that is. So when you click on that, it actually expands it, and it shows you what QuickBooks is suggesting from the perspective of artificial intelligence. So QuickBooks is using the AI, the power of AI, to not just identify the vendor's name, and give you a website or the possible website for that payee. You have a couple of little arrows here that shows you multiple suggestions. So it says it might be supplies, it might be office supplies, or it might be purchases. So based on your chart of accounts, it'll try to triangulate what it knows about the vendor or the payee and suggest a couple of options for you. So based on which option you choose, then you get to pick the category. However, you're still going to get by default the original category, and then anything else that it suggests, it runs it to the top, and it gives you all the suggested categories up there. That is really, really neat because I really truly assist you with the process. So that's actually great. I love that. So then once you select the category, you click on post, and that transaction gets created. Now we're going to click on that little gear menu on the top a little bit more. We're going to look at a little bit more suggestions. We're going to leave group rows by selecting column to the end. The next one I want to show you is show amount spend and receive. That's when you see this column here that shows negatives and positives now be split into sort of debits and credits, but it'll be contextualized as spend and receive. So when you turn that on, then it splits it into two columns. A lot of people like to see the spend side and the receive side separate, right? Again, it's sort of money coming out or money coming in if it's a bank. If it's a credit card, it would be credit card charge and payments to the credit card or returns. So that's that. Then editable, the editable date field, that's interesting. That's usually for people that enter a lot of checks and they want to backdate checks. So for example, let's say that we have, I'm going to search for the word check here. See if anything shows up with the word check. Okay, I guess I haven't loaded any checks in there, but if you had something with a check number, and just imagine that this transaction here, let's just grab one of these. It was a check, and this was actually backdated and written back in June or May. It allows you to overwrite the transaction date, even though it downloaded as a clear date in July. You can sort of backtrack that date. Now that's not going to be that commonly used, but some people will need that. So that's the option to, let's just go back up here. That's the option to click on show editable date field. I typically turn that off and I don't worry about that one too much. Now the next one, this is a really important one. This one's called show full bank description. So QuickBooks attempts to clean up the vendor names and it cleans them up so they're a little bit easier to read. But sometimes when you download stuff to the bank, a lot additional information comes to the bank. So if I click on show full bank description, these payee names are going to change and they may not come in as clean, and you will see extra information like 0182 in this case, which is like the store number. So a lot of times all these extra data like numbers or like this TST symbol for Toast, which is a point of sale system, or the city that they're located, store number, that's a good example. Maybe, let me see something else. I may have a bunch of numbers or letters afterwards. But what essentially all the raw information comes in. So when you don't use this option, show full bank description, and you uncheck that, you're going to see a lot of these vendor names get cleaned up and these numbers get removed, right? So you don't see any of that extra information. For the most part, it tries to clean up the vendors for you from a display perspective. You will still have to create a clean vendor in the to from column. That's still your responsibility. You still need to create the vendor and the payee. That's really important. But this is just for displaying purposes. It could make your life easier to use one or the other. I typically like to show the full bank description because I think that extra data could be contextual, especially like locations of stores and stuff like that, because that could change what the context of the categorization. The other really important option here is called copy bank description to memo. This is my favorite. Generally, this option is selected by default. I would strongly suggest that in your QuickBooks file, if you don't have that, definitely turn that on. And the reason why that's important is, let's say, for example, I go to any one of these transactions and I go in there and I change the vendor name. So in this case, I call this vendor name, let's say, I'm going to call it First W. So I'm going to change the name a little bit. First W, let's say for whatever reason, First W is what came to my mind, and that's what I wanted to call it, right? So the idea is that you can call the vendors whatever you want. You have total control over what you call the payee names, but the original information that came into the bank copies, sort of duplicates itself into the memo. So if you happen to be missing the vendor or the payee, or if you added the wrong one or added some garbage stuff that you don't remember later on what you did, having the original memo gives you a lot of context when looking at the transactions in reports. So I think that is a particularly important and powerful feature, which is, let me just scroll up here and click on the gear, which is this copy bank description to memo. So this combination is how I like it. I like to see spent and received separately. I like to see bank description, and I like to see the description copy to the memo. The editable date field, that's not that important to me, which I explained recently. And editing a check number, again, only important to me if that's relevant, but very rarely I would be using that. Now this option here, remember category selection. This is something that traditionally worked really well in the classic bank feeds, but it doesn't seem to work really well, at least as of the date I'm recording this video. It doesn't seem to be working really well in here. And I'm going to kind of show you what I mean by that. But I'm going to use it in combination of another feature called the grouping. So I'm going to go ahead and click on group rows by selected column. I'm going to select that. And then I'm going to click on remember category selection, right? Because actually I like that feature quite a bit. There's situations in which I don't want it, but I'm going to turn them on together. Then what I'm going to do is I'm going to click on any of the header columns. So I can click on date and it will group the transactions by month. I can click on from to, and it will group the transactions by the payees that I have identified or the customers that I have identified. So in this case, we have a couple of payees identified. If I click on class or location or customer, basically group it by how we have identified the transactions so far. So whatever data is sitting on that grid, it will group it by that. But the best way to group it, in my opinion, is to group it by full bank description. And the reason for that is because very often, this is very much an accounting concept, but very often transactions that sort of repeat, the recurring transactions, we tend to categorize those things the same. So for example, let's say I'm going to grab one of these that has a couple. So let's say we have 3 of these that are all essentially the same. By having a group together, instead of me going into each one and categorizing each one, look how even QuickBooks use different categories. Interestingly enough, one of them is using AI and the other one is not. So it's pretty inconsistent, the whole AI and automatic categorization thing. So you still kind of have to do some categorizations on your own. But this is a good example. So this is like some insurance for a vehicle. So I can click on the little checkbox to the left of the name to basically edit all 3 transactions in bulk. Then I can click on edit here in the bottom. And then in here, I can do payee. So I can call this GM, let's say GM protection plan. I already had it in there. And the account is dues and subscriptions, or the account could be insurance. Whatever happens to be, I'm just picking the columns that I want to change. So I'm not picking all of these, just these 2 are the only 2 I want to change. Then I click on apply or apply and post. What I like about apply is that it closes that pop-up and then it shows you on the screen what it did. If you actually come in here and click on apply and post, it will change it and get rid of them, remove them from the screen. That way you don't have to do one more step, which is now posting them. So instead of posting one by one, I have them all selected. I got them categorized the way I want to, and then I click on post. So that's why I like the grouping, because I can always grab a whole bunch of transactions all at once. Now, I do want to show you the effects that this option is supposed to have. This remember category selection. Let me check on that, make sure that's in there. So remember category selection, the way this is supposed to work, and I'm just going to exit out of it. And then I'll click here again to make sure that the check, it's like sort of not taking. It's one of those really strange things where I click on it and then I get out of it and then I go back to it and it doesn't seem to stay. So I'm not sure why it's doing that. I'm actually going to ungroup these and see if I ungroup and then click on remember category selection. Let's see if that works. But I think that we might just be stuck where this is not working as designed. But let's see. I'm gonna click out of this, go back to it one more time. Okay, and it just doesn't work. So that's the kind of the challenge. that it just seems to be a bug, and I'm pretty sure by the time this video releases, somebody from QuickBooks will look at this and go, oh no, we left a bug there and it won't work anymore. But the way this checkbox is supposed to work, when it's working, when it doesn't like keep kicking me out, the way this works is when you categorize one thing, so for example, this Publix here, which is a supermarket, let's say that's a personal expense. So I put this into owner's draw. The point of remember is when I change one, that they all change at the same time. Okay, look, it actually is working. Okay, never mind. So even though the checkbox doesn't seem to stick visually, it doesn't stick visually, somehow it is working. So that's exactly that's meant to do. So for example, if I change Publix to something else afterwards, let's say I change it to meals, and if this is working the way it's supposed to work, and I click on post, once the same exact payee is identified, it's supposed to change them all at the same time. Let's do one more. I'm going to do the exact same thing, put this under meals, and then post one more. Typically, you would have to, once it recognizes once, you would have to change it a couple of times until it sticks. We'll do 3 times the charm, see if that takes it. Okay, it didn't take it. So very inconsistent, the remember selection, but that's the way it's supposed to work. You categorize one major payee with it once, and then everything that's similar is supposed to follow in terms of what it suggests. Okay, but again, I can select one transaction and then hold the shift key and then go down to the last one and select all of them as a group. So I don't have to have them pre-grouped. I can do click, shift, click all the way down, and then I can do the same thing, go into edit, put this into meals and entertainment, and then go here and put Publix. If I don't have the vendor, I can create the vendor on the fly here, and then click on apply or apply and post, and automatically change all these categories all at once. We're going to click on post. That's great. So I'm going to go ahead and close out the class, location, and customer. So we have a little bit more real estate. The page size, this is just like the traditional one. I can show 50 at a time or 300 at a time. I usually like to show as many as possible. It's kind of like the way I like to operate on these. And I think that's it. I don't think I'm forgetting anything else on this screen worth mentioning. Some of the sort of maybe quasi-hidden things is we have a little drop-down menu that shows me all the accounts that are connected to bank feeds. If I want the bank to be first and the Visa to be second, then I will click on this drop-down menu, click on reorder accounts, and then in this little weird, hard to manage pop-up, zoom in or zoom out, one of these are kind of weird. I click on this little edit button, and then I click and drag this to the top. So it's a little bit quirky, just the way it works. It's just not completely intuitive, but once you kind of figure it out, you X out of that, it will refresh and change the order, put the bank first, and the credit card afterwards. And many people have a lot more than 2 accounts, right? So that's really important. Then we have this little button here called hide account cards, which basically hides the little boxes. And then if you want to switch, you would have to use the drop-down menu, which is good for real estate. Typically, you want to have as much real estate as possible anytime you're working on any of these screens, especially when you have so much data. You want to have as much real estate as possible. You definitely want to leverage Control Plus and Control Minus, the keyboard shortcuts in your browser to zoom in and zoom out. You definitely want to leverage closing this left navigation bar so it doesn't eat away space. A couple of the buttons worth mentioning. We have this one called Print List. So basically, it sends you to a really weirdly, strangely formatted printing of the screen. Not a big fan. This is probably a bug that they need to work on, and we'll X out of that. And then we have the export to Excel. That one's actually a lot more useful. So we'll bring it here, and essentially you get what you would get by downloading this from your bank directly. So you would actually get everything you're seeing in the screen. You get the actual bank description, you get the spend and receive separate, you get whatever payee name you have given already, and then you get the category that QuickBooks assigned automatically. I can see a universe where maybe we'll take this page and do some other sort of analysis in Excel prior to doing the categorization in QuickBooks. But I don't do it that often, but I do see where this could be valuable. The other thing worth mentioning here is, oh yes, a direct go to register button. So when you click on that, it takes you to the specific bank register that you're in. And then up here, there's a bank transactions button that would essentially send you back into the bank feeds screen. So I think in the surface, we have covered essentially everything. We'll do a quick example of exclude. So let's say, for example, these transactions are already in the books and I don't want them to come in as duplicates. I can select a whole bunch of them, click on exclude, and then they get removed from the bank feed. The original transaction that this might be representing a duplicate of, those don't get deleted. These are sitting here pending. Those get moved to exclude, and then they're basically excluded. And from this, you have two options. You can either delete, which is permanently get rid of them. I never want to see them again. Or I can click undo, and undo sends it back into pending. Both from the perspective of the posted screen and the excluded screen, that undo button basically sends it back into pending so you can do something else with it. All right, let's continue to explore all the other areas of bank feeds. Now here is this link account. This is where you have the two options. You can click on link account, and that's basically for you to select your bank, enter your credentials, connect to the bank directly, right? So that's one way of doing it. Or if you happen to have a CSV file or an Excel file or something like that, you can click on where it says upload from file. And then in upload from file, you click on drag and drop. You grab your file that you downloaded from the bank, whatever it is. You click on continue. You pick the bank account that it belongs to. Click on continue. And once you do all the mapping and click continue, then you bring in any transactions that you happen to have already in a spreadsheet format into bank feeds as if you had connected to the bank directly, but you don't have to connect to the bank. As long as you have a spreadsheet, it simulates a bank statement that has been downloaded from the bank directly into QuickBooks. So that's in surface what the screen does. Now we're going to talk about bank rules. And bank rules is when you tell it explicitly how you want things to be categorized, overriding any sort of automatic suggestions or overriding any sort of AI type suggestions. So let's go down the list here and describe maybe something I want to categorize directly. So let's say these two Starbucks. I want to put a very special category called coffee for the office. Let's just say that's what I want to call it. But I don't want to sit here and click on the drop-down menu and change it each time. Let me just create the account here really quick and call it coffee for the office. Make it an expense. We'll pick any of these expense accounts here and then click on save. So now the account is created. And again, I can come in here and I can select coffee for the office every time I want to. QuickBooks is suggesting office expenses and it's suggesting meals and entertainment. So even though I selected coffee from the office, it's suggesting something else. That is okay. So the bank rule would be you overriding the process of automatically selecting something. So there's a couple of ways to create the bank rule. You can go straight from the bank rule page, or you can do it straight from here. So typically what I like to do is I like to kind of set it up first. So I'll create the vendor and the category. So I'll do the combo that I want. So I wanted to do Starbucks and coffee for the office. This is the combo that I want. Then I click on the drop-down menu and then I click on create rule. So that kind of creates, let's say, the template. Okay, so the template comes in and the data that you have selected so far gets pre-filled in here. So it says here, if it's money coming out and if it's coming out of the Visa, and you can override to all bank accounts, by the way, that's an option. And the description contains the word Starbucks, automatically make it coffee for the office, and then select the vendor Starbucks. That's essentially what the rule is. It overrides. Now down here on replace bank memo, I always want to delete that. And I always want to click on also keep existing memo. So I don't want to override the actual bank memo in QuickBooks. What I want to do is I want to bring the original bank memo. So it's kind of a programming error that the people from QuickBooks didn't think about, is that when you create a rule, you don't want to override an existing memo. I mean, there might be a rule where you want to override the memo, but in this particular case, I want the original bank memo to come in and be written in there. So I usually just leave it blank and then click on also keep existing memo, and that makes sure that the existing memo comes in. So in this one, the name, I'll just call it Starbucks. The name doesn't get created automatically. You actually have to type it. So I usually use the same name of the payee. And down here in the bottom, there's automatically confirm these transactions. I'm going to uncheck that, and I'll show you the difference in a second. And then I click on save. And then the rule is created. So once the rule is created, you will see that transactions get automatically categorized. And then you see the word rule in here, letting you know that this was done by the rule. So this one was done, manually when I created the transaction, but then afterwards it was automatically done by the rule. So when this happens, I'm just going to refresh the screen to kind of show you, reset the board here. And when that happens and you're going through the process of recategorizing or accepting transactions, you can click on the filter and then click on where it says rules, and basically only show me the ones that have already been categorized by the rules. And because the rules are explicit, you can trust those, so you don't have to spend a lot of time sort of auditing those. Whereas the stuff that QuickBooks suggests, you do spend time to make sure that it's suggesting it correctly. But when things are just coming in like this cleanly through the rules, awesome, you can select all of them and then just click on post. And now because I have the rules filter, nothing else is showing, I would have to go back into all transactions to see all the transactions again. Let's see a couple of ones here. We're gonna use anything with the word cafe. So let's just, we'll use that as an example, but I'm gonna create the rule explicitly. So I'm gonna go into rules here, and then you see the Starbucks rule is created. So I'm gonna go to new rule, and then we'll call it all cafes. And then let's say, for example, I wanna create a generic vendor called cafes, right? So we're gonna call it cafe generic. So if I don't wanna create the name of each particular vendor for every cafe I ever go to, then I can just create a generic restaurant or gas station or whatever. I typically like to create the vendor name, so some people like to avoid all that. So in this case, we're just gonna do, hey, if it contains the word cafe, or let's say, for example, restaurant, okay, we'll do these two. Okay, so if it contains any of these, so it's or, so that would be an or condition. So all cafes / restaurants. Okay, I misspelled restaurant here. Let me fix that. So let's say money coming out from all bank accounts that contain either cafe or restaurant. Just put it into this generic payee called generic cafe, and then under expense, we'll put it under meals and entertainment. Okay, and then we'll click on save. Now, again, the auto add has been turned off in this particular case because we're creating the rule from scratch. We're not creating the rule explicitly from the individual transaction. So we'll leave that off, and we'll come back and show you that. And oh, you can't use special characters. You can't use slashes in there. So there's my two rules. Then I go back into bank transactions, and then I can filter again just by the ones that have rules. And then you got Juan Valdez and Flower Bakery Cafe. They're all being categorized to this generic cafe vendor or payee name, and then they're all going into meals and entertainment. But because I have the copy bank description to memo, I could always go back and look at the report where it's showing that the payee is cafe, but it'll show in the memo the full original bank description because I told it to bring that information down to the memo. So you're always going to be able to kind of keep the visuals of what that payee name looked like originally from the bank, even if you're selecting a different vendor or payee while you are posting or while you're categorizing the transactions. So I can click on all of these and then click on post. So we'll go back here to all transactions. We'll do one more. I want to go back to grouping, and then that will help me identify maybe another one that's pretty big, that has a lot of transactions. I'm gonna look for one that's busy. Let's see what's the busiest one we have here. Okay, this is good. So this one called make.com, good example. So like QuickBooks randomly is putting some things in owner's draw, something in office expenses, something in computer equipment and office. So it's just really funny and silly, really, in a way that the AI is not smart enough to at least be consistent with the suggestions. But again, this is where rules pay off. So we're gonna just select what we want. So this will be make.com. We'll create the vendor called make.com, and let's say this is gonna go into dues and subscriptions. Okay, so that's the one. That's sort of the model that you want. Then I go here into create rule. The rule gets created for me automatically. This time around, I'm going to click on automatically add. Again, I'm going to replace the bank memo and then go back here and click on also keep existing memo. That's something you have to remember to do. People forget to do that all the time. And then I'm just going to come in here and copy the name of the payee as the name of the rule up here in the top, and then click on save. That creates the rule. I told it to automatically assign, which means that I no longer will see the transactions in there. So I'm killing two birds with one stone. I'm creating the rule, and I'm also automatically assigning the transactions. Now, what's neat about the posted tab in here is that once you look at the posted tab, you get to see, which transactions were created by a rule, and then which transactions were automatically posted. So you actually get to see, okay, this one was done manually, but this one was created by a rule. This one was created by an auto rule. So that could also give you some context in terms of whether or not you want to undo or double check if it's been entered correctly. Now, the filter allows you to see the ones that were entered by rules, and this is both automatic rules and non-automatic rules. And then we have the auto post. So only the rules that were automatically posted. So accountants, we go back and look at this a lot and see what is being posted automatically and just auditing that to make sure that that is accurate. And even if I wanted to change that, I can edit these. Let's say, for example, they're supposed to be equipment or software or something like that. Let's say that's what it's supposed to be. You can actually overwrite the transaction, even though it was created by a rule. You can overwrite that in there and have it be categorized something else. Now, if I send these back, just to kind of show the undo process, if I send these back and click on continue, they get removed from the posted screen. When I go back into pending, they're now going to be, or they should be, automatically categorized by the rule. Let me just go down here, but they weren't posted automatically, even though this was an automated rule, because they noticed that I undid it once. So when you undo it once, it doesn't get stuck in a loop going back into categorizing that. So it's smart enough to know that the auto rule categorizes things once, but if you undo it, it will just categorize them through the rule, but it won't automatically post them. So it's really interesting. There's a lot of logic that has gone through, which is why I think QuickBooks really has built the gold standard in bank feeds. The new screen, it's a lot to get used to, especially where you're used to the old screen. But I'm glad that the functionality, for the most part, seems to be working really, really well. All the tools, the rules, the batching, all seem to be working really well. The last thing I'll show here is the matching. Okay, so the purpose of matching is if a transaction has already been created and you don't want QuickBooks to sort of double up, you click on match, and then the match sends you into a screen where you can search transactions that have already been created and match those two together. So let's say, for example, I'm going to create these transactions separate. So I want you to imagine for a minute that back before I even downloaded this through bank feeds, I created that transaction manually. So we'll grab one of those Ubers. Let's say this one, the one for 1105. So again, imagine that I'm not looking at bank feeds. Imagine that I showed up with my receipt to my bookkeeper and say, hey, please log this expense. And that person went into and clicked on expense, selected the Visa account. Let's say did Uber Travel, create a vendor called Uber Travel or something like that, or Uber app. Then went in here, and I don't remember the date, but I'll just pick a date here, 24. And then they went here to travel, and they put the dollar amount that matches. Maybe they split it. Okay, maybe it was $20 flat here, and then $3.82. Let's say the tip. Okay, it's still going to be under travel, but let's say for whatever reason you want to split those up, and we'll put here tip, and then we'll put here fair or something like that. Okay, so this has already been entered. Let's say they've also already added an attachment. There's already been a receipt associated with that. So the transaction was already created in the past. So back when it happened, the transaction has been created. And then the context is that you're sitting here in bank feeds, you connected the bank, you downloaded all the transactions, but you don't want to sit there and duplicate the transaction. So what you want to do is you want to match these up, right? So for example, this one right here, that's 2382. I'm going to click here on match. And then this should help me find the transaction. And then I can click on this little checkbox and it'll find the transaction. Now, why didn't it match automatically? I'm not sure. Maybe because it was Uber Travel and not Uber Eats. It seems to be a little bit tricky in terms of like when it actually matches automatically. But you always have the option to go and find the match, right? And then click on match. So you always have that option to go fetch the match. And that's why you have that match button in there. And again, very useful if the transaction not only has already been created, but it has already been created with a attachment of sorts. One last thing worth showing here is under the receipts tab, you can upload any receipt you want. So I can click on upload receipts, click on upload receipts, upload from Google, or just click on select file and select my receipt that I happen to have. So let's say I have a receipt there that I'm uploading. For some context, I'll show you what that receipt looks like. So it's a receipt that I actually created with ChatGPT. But this is a kind of a photorealistic receipt, like on a lap, and there it is, $78.15, right? So that's the receipt that I'm uploading. And then you get to see that QuickBooks recognizes some of the stuff from the receipt. If I actually click on review, it opens up an expense screen where I can create the transaction basically on the fly. And again, it brings in the category, it brought in some description, the total dollar amount, the date, the vendor, if the vendor happens to exist. Here's the little bit of a preview here on the left-hand side. So it's basically a workflow where you can start, you can save a draft or save and close, create this transaction. So if I create the transaction, I created it from the receipt. And then when I go back into bank transactions, and then I go down to that chevron, I could just do a search in this case. We'll do a chevron search. Okay, there's my chevron. It's supposed to detect it, right? So if it doesn't detect it, we got to click on match and then select the transaction here and click on match. That's kind of the challenge that we have, is that we have to remember which ones are supposed to be matched and which ones are not supposed to be matched. One of the things that QuickBooks is supposed to do proactively is recognize when a transaction, where's that chevron transaction? Sorry. Let me pull that up again. Is recognize when the transaction looks like something else. Unfortunately, we're still sort of kind of a step back in the perspective that the transaction has already been created and it's not matching. And then from the receipt screen, unfortunately, there isn't a way to match it with the banking. Like you can go to find match and you can match it to a regular transaction, but you can't match it to a banking feed. So that's kind of where we still have a little bit of confusion, where the receipts and the bank feeds are not talking to each other. But that's something that QuickBooks is likely going to fix at some point, or something to really to really look at. Because at the end of the day, if you don't match them, then you'll have the issue when they'll become duplicated, and then you have to choose what you're going to delete when it comes to reconciling. So I'll post some videos in the description about reconciling, because reconciling is a whole nother ballgame, but at least I wanted to get you acquainted with bank feeds as a full review of bank feeds, and get you ready for the new version of the bank feed screen, which seems to be creeping up to more and more QuickBooks files. Anyway, I hope you found that useful, and I'll see you on the next one.